Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday evening. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Welcome, Graham, our expert for today. Folks, there are moments in life which are easier than if you are grieving over a loss of a friend. We have to communicate also on this channel that unfortunately, with great regret and sadness, we took notice that our friend Marshall Lager has passed away last week. It was at a sudden, it was a complete surprise, and we still are in a state of shock. And if you knew him, if you have listened to him, his wisdom, his specific humor, and his fine attitude in adding his comments and sharing thoughts, and always in an appreciating manner to those which were our guests, you know that we will miss a friend, a colleague, and a very knowledgeable chap we have enjoyed for a long time. So we have to look forward to, as in his obituary statement on Facebook from his family, there were some very warm and friendly words. There you can leave a note if you like, or you see some parts of taking notice and giving us some wrap up on how they felt in the moment they got the news from Brent Leary and Paul Greenberg. And I was grateful that I got a friendly message from Paul on giving the status that has happened. Now, Marshall was, as he told about himself in the starting period, he was that very famous court jester type, such as he had the right, like, to say the king words the king wouldn't like to hear from anybody else, or he would have chopped off his head. And that was a kind of wisdom, cleverness, smartness, and friendly approach, which I honorably will miss most. And that is something in the bottom of my heart, which I keep with a laugh and a good memory. And so Marshall is at another place, at a better place, as he's doing. So let's have some minutes after our CM conversation, and I would like to go for our guest and the topic we have found to be most actual, even that it is over 30 years known and old. Why the heck do CM projects not work out in the way they were intended to? And we would like to unpack a bit in more detail the CRM technology approach, the understanding of implementation failures, and the user adoption has been also a topic for one of the road shows last year, and there was some reflection as well. So welcome, Graham, and I'm very happy that you could make it.
Thanks, Ralph. It's a great pleasure to be here, even in difficult circumstances. I didn't know Marshall very well, but I had met him and jousted with him and jested with him on several convos, and he had that amazing knack of, you'd finish a long and detailed explanation of some complicated topic, and right at the end, he'd ask you that most difficult question you most feared, but somebody had to ask. And that was what Marshall did so very well. So you miss him, we all miss him, and as you say, he's gone to a better place. Hopefully he plays with much better CX than we get in this particular place.
And I'd love to share the thoughts from our dear friend John Reed, which gave us only a hint on the personal note that he is bearing with us, and Marshall, and he also reminds me that there was a very nice statement on that we should remember. Marshall's family has encouraged us and requested us to have a joyful laugh with the loved ones we know, and with that suggestion to give us a positive moment in connection in his honor. So I appreciate your words, John. Thank you very much. That is how a lot of us are feeling right now. Having said that, Marshall was also, like Thomas, who is on a business trip in India, very keen in looking behind things and behind reasons and going for some explanations or findings why things are going that way. So it would be interesting, Graham, if you introduce yourself, and even that you have been with us for several times, and I know you for quite a time. It is to several people a completely new face with an expertise they should learn and get aware of, that we haven't won you for that CRM convo, as there is a lot you can say about these checking in about the understanding and implementing of technology and the attitude, how people are working with a CRM solution and where they have their hurdles.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
I think that's right. So a little bit about me really fast. So I've been a consultant, director, and interim for over 30 years, major corporations around the world. Unlike most people, I've had different lives, and my different lives in terms of CRM have involved building CRM software, commercial software, obviously implementing and also using it. So most vendors get to build and implement, but they never use. Most customers get to implement and use, but they never build. I've done all three. So it's quite interesting. It gives you an interesting perspective on the challenges you face as a CRM vendor, but even bigger than that, the challenges you face as a CRM user, and where we do get all the value out of the CRM that we've bought at great expense from vendors.
Yeah, and it is very important topic to jump into, such as there is an idea, there is a plan, and then either they do it as a do-it-yourself approach, which as a consultant would not encourage too much, because I know some of the outcome. Not every do-it-yourself project ends in a disaster, but unfortunately, a lot of them go south, to say so. And also, it is a very interesting aspect to see what kind of thinking one needs, such as do not approach it as a technology project, do the approach as a people's project. Think from the benefit side, not from the technology side.
Yes.
Don't think it from, if you want to have a user adoption, where do you relieve pain points? How did you find this is working?
Yeah, it's a very, as you say, the hard data suggests between 30 and 70% of CRM projects fail to deliver their goals, whatever those goals are. That means fail to be implemented, fail to be used, fail to deliver value. There've been several studies on this. There's a big Harvard Business Review study a few years ago where this number came. I think the modal number or the median number was 70%. That's the figure I normally use.
Wow.
And if you think about it, there's three phases in most projects. There's a planning phase where we work out what the hell we want, what are we trying to do, what technology do we need. Technology always involved. There's a implementation part of the project where we actually get to implement technology, and often in a rapid 90-day or less period of time. Let's get it in the door. And then there's a lifetime in theory, or so several years in reality, before technology is amortized and depreciated down to zero, of using technology to create value. And each of them have their own challenges, and those challenges drive or conflate together or combine together to drive the failure rates that we see. And that we have challenges in the first part, the planning process, because we often buy technology without really thinking what we're going to do with it. We buy technology because somebody else has got it. Somebody's got Pega. We need Pega as well, because Bank B, our big rival has got it. So if they've got it, we need, or any other technology. I'm not picking on Pega, but on Pega, SAS, Adobe, you named all the same. We need some new technology. Okay, let's make a Christmas list of all the wonderful things we could do for functionality, even though we're never going to use 90% of them or 75% of them, and so on. So you get challenges in selection technology. Bob Thompson a few years ago ran a survey looking at CM projects as part of CM Guru. This is 10 years ago or more now.
Yeah.
One of the things that he found, or two of the things he found out of that survey, I think it was several hundred people responding on how their CRM projects had gone. One of the things he found out was the choice of vendor made absolutely no difference whatsoever to CRM project success. One of the other things that he found, which I find even more interesting, is that the choice of software, providing it could do the minimum you wanted to do with it, had absolutely no impact on project success either. So the vendor you choose and the technology you choose, provided it can do what it says on the tin, has no impact at all on project success. So that's a very sobering thought if you think about it. A huge amount of all the vendors are promoting their supposed USPs, or it's a bit out of date USPs, I suppose. There's their features and their benefits, but in reality, and they're all quoting the Gartner and the Forrester comparison report.
Yeah.
But they don't mean anything really. Providing it has the functionality you need to do what you want to do with it, the choice of vendor technology is pretty much irrelevant. We'll come on to there's a reason why in a second when we talk about implementation, developing complementary capabilities.
John had a very valid point as we were discussing on further CRM convos that the intense using suggestion of AI agents might change the game. What is your take on his statement request in the direction of the user adoption?
Okay, let's break it into three parts: selecting agents in the first place, implementing them, and then using them. So I'm not an expert on customer service, but I have some experience of using AI, Gen AI, and limited experience of experimenting with agents as well. So I'll take it from my perspective, what I've read around the topic. So I think a lot of use of AI today, there's two things I think I should say. First of all, a lot of companies have added the magical words AI to their products, even though they probably only contain a little bit of analysis or maybe a bit of machine learning. Rather than AI as we recognize it, or generative AI as it's more, as we think about it more today. That's the first thing to think about. Second thing is, if you want to use a new technology, you need to have a pretty good understanding of what you're going to do with it. That means your understanding of the jobs you're trying to do as a staff member and how you measure success. They then turn into use cases and requirements. And that should be the foundation for selecting any technology, including AI technology or Gen AI technology or technology generally. So AI supported CRM. The element around implementation is also really important. So like most technologies, you can't just add AI agents and expect everything to work amazingly like all the sales ads and the promotional materials from the vendors. You need to build out complementary capabilities So bits of process and bits of new data. Obviously, AI requires a really good data quality. Most companies don't really have that data quality. A lot of it is out of date and is a little bit poor quality. You need to add some integration with the technology potentially. You need to think about how you organize and structure your roles. Is an agent going to take on the whole role? Probably not. It'll probably take on a task or several tasks within an activity. You need to think about how you collaborate with other parts of the organization. You need to think about how our culture works, and of course, how we do governance. And allied to that, in addition, you need to think about how you're going to change and introduce this new technology, which is potentially threatening. So a little while ago, I developed a capability model for Gen AI. And most of the factors that came out of that were to do with having really good use cases, which comes back to your selection point. Comes with the fears that staff had for new technology, replacing them potentially, replacing part of their work, and the downward pressure on wages or salaries that would generate. And the fear of management just doing things to them. If you look at the reasons why technology generally fail, appear to be implemented, the number one reason was a lack of involvement of staff at all levels, so management supporting as well as staff who can be supporting as well in implementing technology. And that applies as much to agent-based technology or Gen AI technology more generically as it does for CRM and other older technologies. I think that's a challenge. Then we get to the adoption part, which of course is how do we train people? How do we communicate what the technology is going to be doing for us? Again, how do we involve people in all that process so that the agent is seen to be a supporting tool rather than a competing tool? So if you look at the research into whether people like AI in terms of customer service, conversational AI in tools, what we find, if I remember this correctly, and make sure I don't get this wrong way around, for delivering good news, they preferred an agent of some kind of a technology, and for delivering bad news, no, the other way around. I think for delivering bad news, we preferred technology. For delivering good news, they preferred a human. But whichever way around, it doesn't make much difference. The key point is you need to be able to identify which use case you want to use your agent for, and use it appropriately, and recognize it's experimental to a certain degree. You're always going to need a human in the loop or human in the loop for exceptions once things are proven and tested, and work on that basis. So like any new technology, you need to probe, sense, and respond and work out as you go along.
It's interesting to see that also studies done yearly by the colleagues out of Aachen from Schovarit, that those findings you just reflected to a certain extent were shared there as well. And they did in these regular surveys a lot of stuff, and they came to the point that over 28% of the users which are doing the project do have some challenges with their time planning. Around about 21% do have a general problem with data migration.
Yes.
8% have hurdles in generally integrating to the connecting systems which they need to do their job and get their all over jobs to be done.
Yes.
17% do have system adoption challenges, such as they want to create a Volkswagen Beetle to a Porsche, and this is never working out, even if you're a smart tuner. And 15% in the latest survey, which has been undertaken 23, was claiming that they did have not enough internal resources. So starting a project with not enough resources. That is not only the aspect of I took technology and I am surprised that it is not working in the suggested way, but it is also the aspect of being challenged that I asked lately several organizations where they see the most challenging part. And they answer frankly that the most challenging part is not that the AI buzzword voodoo is taking them a bit off track, as they fell not on in shape and following the hype on the train, and that they do not make access of these so suggested benefits, but they had the feeling, not only focusing on AI, that it is for them the challenge to get the people involved and love what they do with the system, such as the commitment of using a system is working, from my understanding, only then when they do see their own benefit, when they see their own life getting better, when they see that out of that role from that part of the job, they can deliver better performance for their customers and to become customers. And they have a good gut feeling in the experience they get delivered, that they like what they get delivered.
Sure. But I mean, if you think about it, none of this is rocket science, is it? It's all stuff we've known for 30 years. We don't. It's like people talking about the weather. Everybody talks about it, but nobody does anything about it. It's the same with challenges of projects and what have you as well. So, if we work out what we're trying to do, we buy the right technology. Most people buy too much technology. They buy technology they can never ever use. And if you look at Gartner, talking about MarTech, they estimate that 67% of technology functionality that you buy is never used. If you are a typical SME buying Microsoft CRM as an example, I'm not picking on Microsoft because the technology is fine. Microsoft CRM, you're probably going to be spending 25%, 10% of your budget on marketing, 25% on MarTech. In a 100 million turnover company, then we're talking about 17% of your marketing budget is spent on technology you never ever use. That's just bonkers. I mean, if you normally you get fired for that sort of thing. So getting people to use more technology first involves people buying the technology you need and you're going to use anyway. And secondly, getting it implemented properly. That means getting people involved. That means having competent project management. That means having a coherent CM strategy so that you know what technology you need to be able to drive your CM strategy forward. But having proper systems implementation and also integration with other technologies and data as well. You mentioned data. A lot of companies don't really know what data they have. I did work a long time ago as part of GDPR with the UK telco. We did some colleagues did an information asset register review. We discovered we had 800 different databases, data flows, and technologies, all having their own data, sometimes with third parties. I did another similar project with a UK railway company. They didn't actually know what they had. So we had to do a very fast, quick and dirty information asset register review just to work out what data they had. And if you look at a lot of the data was out of date. It was incomplete. It was old. It was irrelevant. They had no legal right under GDPR to actually hold the data because they weren't actually using it for anything that they had permission to use it for. So taking the money and creating liability if anybody came around to do a data audit. So a lot of companies routinely collect data, but they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with it, and it isn't kept in good order, it isn't integrated and kept clean and integrated with other data that can make it useful, or augmented with new data from third parties or fourth parties to make it really powerful. They don't collect customer contextual data about the customer and their intentions, their desires, their intentions, their immediate actions. That's what you really need to be able to respond to. So the data state is often quite poor quality. So you have these things that get in your way of implementing. Then you have a different set of factors, and that applies to AI even more so, with its dependence on data. Then you have a different set of factors that are similar but not quite the same, and why technology is not adopted. So you've bought it, you've implemented it, you've spent a lot of money. If you look at Microsoft and their guide, Success by Design, I think it's called, implementing Microsoft 365 CRM, for example, they will tell you that for every dollar or pound or euro you spend on licenses, you should spend 3 to 4 pounds, dollars, or euros on building out all those complementary things and managing the change process to get all the value out of the dollar you spent on licenses. How many companies do that? I would argue hardly any of them. Yet the surprise technology implementation projects fail, including AI, Gen AI, or agentic AI. You know, I hate the word agentic AI. It's not really a proper word, is it? Agentic. So agent-based AI, as I always think about it. So, you know, we know how to do these things, and yet so often we get taken by the hype. Gartner also tells us in the hype cycle that we're at the point of peak of disillusion, or peak expectations or hyped expectations for Gen AI and agentic AI or agent-based AI at the moment. So we shouldn't be surprised if people are over-promising and struggling to deliver. And AI is a different sort of thing compared to a lot of technology.
As I have not my signs with me, I use now a pen with a orange rubber to make myself available and get a little focus on one of the comments John just shared, that he, as you can read and the audience can read, that you value your topic answer on the agentic approach. Now, having said that, we have also another interesting comment that on the frustrations John is seeing in how little tech investment is made in monitoring projects in real time based on agreed upon KPIs for vendor and partners and customers. So much a good project is about making course connections in a timely way. Any comments on that one from my end, even that I was not asked? That is exactly the reason why I looked very much into the studies of Trovarit, because Trovarit in Germany and Aachen has developed a methodology and some software tools which they use not only for the selection process, but if they are asked to accompany the project, they follow very detailed in their own platform and tool how the job is done, what is delivered, and they even can assist within what they call in-place implementation methodology and help organizations to stay on track. So such a course correction, quick, fast, effective, and efficient, is exactly what is helping organizations if they get some advisory and not do it as a do-it-yourself project, John. There is a chance to go on that. What is your take, Graham?
So that's a very German response, isn't it? Let's the old joke is, if you don't know what the answer is as German, you write a process rather than trying to solve the problem. And it's a joke. It's a joke that you learn at INSEAD relatively early on.
You just showed the comment again. So
there are some good points there. Von Clausewitz famously said, "The no plan survives first contact with the enemy."
yes,
That applies to CRM projects and other projects as well. So you need to have coherent plans. I mean, we've done this before. It's not as though we're doing something brand new. We've never done it before. So it's in what Dave Snowden would classify in his Connecting framework as a complicated thing. So we engage experts who will help us to create time-boxed plans to implement things we've done many times before. Whether they've succeeded or not is a different question. I think the Microsoft point about the $4 versus the $1 is also important, which is the way that I tackle these problems is, ideally, before I start thinking about what technology we want to buy and what the requirements are, I do a couple of things. I would do a jobs analysis of the jobs of the users trying to work out what they're actually trying to do and how they measure success, which comes back to your KPIs point. But I'd also do a capability assessment of the capabilities that I need to have in place in order to be able to make the technology work and deliver all the value it's going to theoretically deliver. That tells me what the gap is between what my current capabilities are and what capabilities I need to implement and use all the functionality of this expensive technology. That means when I come to plan, when I've selected the technology based around my use cases derived from jobs to be done and requirements derived from desired outcomes from users, and this is how I've built software as well, commercial software for telcos. Then we come to the point where when I'm planning, I need to plan to develop these capabilities in parallel with implementing technology, because there's no point having all the technology if I can't use it. And that's the biggest reason why 67% of MarTech functionality is never used, other than buying things we don't want. The other big reason is we don't have the complementary capability, we don't have the processes, the data, linkages to other technologies, the roles and organization, the collaboration, the culture, or the governance to get all the value of technology. So as I'm implementing this new technology, I need to be implementing these other things, $3 to $4 versus $1, in order to get all the value out of them. If I don't plan around that and I don't set KPIs for my project, so KPIs, not OKRs. Okay, so there's a difference between the two in my view. So OKRs are things, KPIs are the things you use to measure performance, key performance indicators. Typically, I'd have a systemic balanced scorecard derived from the work that Kaplan and Norton did in the 90s. They've been using the strategy maps approach to doing that. So I have understanding what drives what over what period of time and so forth. And I'd have that for the technology elements of the project and also for the non-technology elements that you're spending even more money on in theory. So that means and we start from where we are today with our current capabilities and implementing technology. We develop more capability by building it out and aligning it with technology, getting people to use things. We go forward in a series of phased transition states towards what we want to get to, which is having all the capabilities we require to use all the functions we want to use in the technology. People are trained, integration is there, people have the right attitude, the right roles and collaboration is there, we have the right governance in place. And so if we have those things and we recognize that, as I said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, or in case the customer, as it were, then as I move forward from where I am, and I'm looking to make lots of changes in parallel with the technology being implemented to move me along. And there's, we have tools to do this. So the tool I use is an adaptation of Dave Snowden's SUN mapping approach, which is a sense-making approach to drive change, rather than if I see a North Star, I know your project's doomed to failure. It's quite a strong statement to make. If I see you're doomed by a North Star, I know you're going to fail, because you're thinking about where you want to get to, some nirvana state in the future, not where you are, because change starts where you are, not where you want to get to. That only provides a sense of direction. So we have vector-driven approaches to drive this change process. And as I said, Dave Snowden's SUN mapping is a sense-making approach to use that you can work out from where you are, which things you need to manage, which things are so volatile you need to dampen them down so that they don't cause a problem, and which things can't you really change, but you need to monitor anyway. Things like changing regulation and what have you. So that provides you with a framework to change at an organizational, team, and individual level, in parallel with developing your complementary capabilities, in parallel with implementing technology. So a lot of stuff, why do projects like this fail? Because there are lots of moving parts. You need to manage all of them and know how well they're doing through the KPIs that John was mentioning, so that you have a good chance of actually getting to the end step by step, transition state by transition state. And if you're really smart, we try to be really smart when doing our work, we're aligning this to shareholder value drivers as well. It's because I need to be able to make choices. I need to be able to make a choice driven by knowing how this impacts sales growth rate or operating profit margin, because they're the only two levers I can pull in a CRM project. I can't pull all the levers of shareholder value. Doesn't really work. Investment growth rate doesn't really apply here. So I need to know what I'm doing is going to drive economic value, shareholder value, Otherwise, I can just do stuff that doesn't have any value or destroys value worse.
So John was on the same page. It was just the provocative starting point with the KPIs.
Sure.
But what is counting is something else, which we go for in a minute. I just wanted to place the comment that it is important, if you are in discussion with a potential customer who is going to look for the fitting to their needs CRM, that they get some advice on user interface and the general friendliness of the impact a CRM implementation will have, such as the ease of use, seeing the benefit. And then we come precisely to John's comment, such as where he mentions, the KPIs is one part of the game. Fair enough. I just use KPIs because I have to go for a somewhat concise question. But the bigger issue, and there I'm with him, is the real-time project monitoring. That is what I try to mention with the German portal, is that based on the agreed upon outcomes, such as it's not only the North Star and some other friendly guiding lights in the sky, it is even the more touching and feeling, adopting things we have agreed on, that you get me some more time for customer talks, and whoops, I'm spending now 6 more hours in fiddling around with a system which is not easy to use, and I spent most of my time I wanted to gain in a new pain. Yeah,
indeed, that's a very good point. The number one reason why we don't implement technology or sim technology is lack of user involvement. That was the biggest. I carried out a meta-analysis of 50 studies to try and work out what they said was the biggest reasons, and this is what came out of that. So number one thing for implementation was lack of involvement. The number one thing for lack of adoption was poor systems usability. And quite things. But if you think about it, I've been in that fortunate position of actually building marketing software with a team in China and Amsterdam for a telco JV with a BSS replacement provider. And we used the approach I described of working with the telco's marketers to identify the jobs to be done, their desired outcomes that got turned into use cases and user requirements, which then drove through extreme programming, agile model, the development of the software on a weekly release basis. But we also, the software, it's an interesting project because the telco users basically wanted Unica Affinium, which was the leading MarTech tool at the time. But it's extremely expensive and also very overly complicated as well. I've used it in the past too on other projects. It's overly complicated. Too much functionality never gets used. So what we ended up doing is, because they weren't going to get that from the BSS provider, my job was to, first of all, recover a scorched project where two sides weren't talking to each other, then create a set of requirements based around a classic Clayton Christensen disruptive innovation model of what's the 40% of functionality you actually are ever going to use, and how can I deliver that for you, but only 20% of the cost of buying Unica Affinium. But also, because I understand how you do your work now, because I was a commercial marketer at the time anyway, how do we design the software so that it works exactly as a marketer would do things, in the right order, with the right things? When you go to the next screen, you're exactly what you're expecting for. Like when you sit in a Japanese car, all the controls are exactly where you think they should be. If you sit in a German car, in the wrong place because they didn't think about that in the same place. So there's the car. So most software is designed by people who don't understand the day job and will never use it to do the day job. And the result is poorly designed, overly complicated, tortuous software that requires a lot of training and is easily forgotten if you don't use it all the time. So I can't change much of that for most things. I can change that with agent-based stuff because obviously I'm going to be working with software engineers to be able to design the agents themselves. Like in the same way I design prompts to use Gen AI, which requires some programming knowledge to do that competently. You can't just give a normal user a chat GPT or one of the latest versions or any of the other many of the tools available today and say, create great prompts. It won't work because you need to understand how the language works or how the technology works to a certain extent. You need to understand how you create prompts. You need to understand a little bit about program design, natural language program design, to create prompts that actually work and are maintainable and usable. And the same thing applies to agentic, agent-based AI as well. I'm not going to use the word agentic, sorry. So all of those things come together to provide you with the fact that the second biggest issue for adoption is a lack of onboarding, training, and support.
Oh, I'm with you.
And the third big factor for adoption is poor communication about what the hell we're trying to do for anyway. And so I don't engage you. I don't train you. The system doesn't work very well. They don't communicate with you. What a surprise! People don't adopt technology. And even if they must adopt it, people find ways to not adopt it. So, for agent-based technology, the movement from human in charge to human in the loop to human in the loop for exceptions, in some things, basically bearing in mind the agent will do tasks, not the whole job, generally. Just like RPA does tasks, not the whole job as well. It's quite an organizational change challenge at the individual level, at the team level, at the organization level. So it is, these are complicated things. It's new. We don't really know how it works necessarily. There's continuous evolution of the technology itself. So what we're doing a month ago is probably a little bit out of date now. And unless we focus on keep our eyes with a laser-like focus on the business and the desired outcomes we want, it's actually quite easy to get attracted by shiny new baubles and forget why the hell we're using them. No, I saw some data the other day that suggested 80% of AI, or Gen AI, agentic AI projects fail for a variety of technical and indeed non-technical human-based, related reasons. So it's the same old failure rate for new technology they've always had. You know what I'm going to say now, don't you? Remember my famous equation: OO plus NT equals EOO. Do you remember that was from our previous conversation? Old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization.
That was
no different with AI, AI, CRM, ERP before that, etc. You name it.
Yeah, and we had not only that discussion and that comment at that time from Mike, who was jumping into that discussion as well, but it is what I observe right now is the moment you tell a potential customer that you have the plan to join in not only with a consultant team in analyzing a situation, but you have a dedicated person which is looking only and in her own sole role for change management issues, for change management needs, for training, for proper onboarding, and how the organization is capable of taking these organizational preparation and requirements so that with the investment in some new technology, you also have reshaped the organization to have at least a refurbished or new painted organization if it's not a new one. Yeah.
I think that's right. So obviously, and it's not vendors' jobs to make technology use successful. And it's quite an interesting thing to say. Vendors' job
to sell their crap.
Their stuff. It's not crap. It's the technology is often very, very good, but it's not their job to implement it, nor is it their job to get people to use it properly. That's somebody else's job. We have SIs to do implementation. My view is that a lot of them aren't very good at it. the bigger the organization, in my experience, the worse they are at it. If I was hiring an SI to do an implementation, I would not be hiring one of the big name consultancies. I won't name them out of politeness, but I'd be hiring an expert boutique who does this for a living and has done for the last 30 years. A team of people with each of 20 to 30 years experience. This is why I work with Optima partners, because they've all got 20 to 30 years experience like I have, doing the work that I've done. We know, we've been there, we've got the t-shirt, we know how to make these things work, and we do make these things work for our clients. So
there is a completely different attitude in the market with these which are committed to the success of their customers and not in greedy catching their money.
Yeah, so that's the weakest link in the whole thing is, after my rapid implementation of the technology and started to build out the complementary capabilities, usually the vendor's gone there and you've got a customer success team looking after the vendor who's not actually interested in customer success at all, in terms of, here's my customer, they're successful. Success for them is higher ARR and MRR and other sales related figures. They're there to on-sell and to make sure the next year's sales are there also in terms of repeat purchase. So nobody's looking after the success of the customer. The SI is gone because they've implemented. The customer success team for most vendors aren't really interested in the customer success, nor are they skilled, because you need to be almost like a 30-year-old, 30 years experience consultant. You need to understand how organizations work and how CRM technology works and how CRM drives value or destroys value and how to manage change and how to do a bit of process engineering when necessary, blah, 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 in order to be able to make your customer successful using those technologies. I mean, at Optima Partners, we built a tool called Revenue Builder that does exactly this. It does the capability assessment. It works out how to put all those capability and change levers along with the technology while implementing technology to make sure that you are successful. And then you give the client new knowledge, skills, and experience about how to make technology work. And then you support them over a period of time. And that could be 2 to 3 years potentially, while they're getting all the value out of technology they bought, using more functionality, bringing new people on. You're embedding ambassadors into the staff so that people get advanced training and be involved more deeply. They become the trainers for your other colleagues in the organization. The staff train other staff, train the trainer. They are the first line of defense when somebody has a problem. And if you need somebody to refer to the help center or the help desk of the vendor, then they're the one who feels that query and looks after it. They own that problem and fix it. All these people.
Sorry?
I say all need to leave pulled at the same time.
Yeah. And here is the signal pen, such as, surprise, surprise, the friendly gentleman who was commenting so busy and vividly is on stage. Hi, John. Good to have you aboard.
Hello. Yeah, I actually held off on commenting too much this time because I wanted to actually really enjoy this conversation. Great job. But I thought someone needed to fulfill the Marshall Lager role of crashing with a good, question at the end of the conversation. So why not me?
And it is a pleasure to have you with us. And also in memory of our dear friend Marshall, yes, that is something, jumping in and placing some questions which get us on track in thinking in several directions. And that is very valuable. Thank you for that one. Going for that very fresh experience, the people I'm having contact with in the late months, where they were concerned how the adoption, how the integration, how the onboarding overall success will work out, and what they can do by themselves, as nobody is looking for them without getting paid, how they can manage that drill, that exercise, that they drive towards a successful project. So, gentlemen, what are your takes on lately received experiences not only on the AI voodoo and that it's nobody on the road who shows honest, real payback yet, or that they even are capable of jumping around with more than a handful of successful projects, you can state. So the overall challenge for us is a normal project. How do we make it successful? Any
John,
ideas?
you go for that. John first, as our guest. I think that's right. You should.
Well, so just real quick, I mean, I hope folks had a chance to listen to this whole conversation, because I think, Graham, I think you really laid out a very in-depth and practical view of what project success looks like. And as a result of that, your views on AI were fairly painstaking and in terms of how that integrates into all of that. And I think that's right. I don't think AI is some magic thing you sprinkle on top. In fact, I talk about AI as an accelerator, in the sense that if your data and processes are not in a good place, then sprinkling AI into that mix is going to really make it worse. But one thing I talk about with AI is, I think we have to be a little careful about ROI right now, because costs and pricing are such a moving target. But I do think it's appropriate to start talking about results, right? So that we can at least talk about what do we get out of this. And I think a lot of this comes down to very specific use case design, which I think Graham covered in the case of support, for example, which is one of the areas in CRM where AI can be effective right now. I think marketing is another example where there are definitely some use cases around campaign management. I would push back a little bit on some of the creative and content stuff, but that's a different conversation. But anyway, I think there's some interesting use cases there, and certainly sales from the vantage point of things like sales advisors. And, so there's some very interesting CRM related AI use cases that I think are, somewhat low hanging fruit, if you will, because they don't tend to involve a lot of things around compliance and legality that really affect adoption in some cases. But the one thing I would say, and then I'll turn it over to Graham, is I do think that while you're right that even in the case of like service, I don't think you're going to see massive headcount reductions anytime soon. The perception of that fear is real. And I think one of the things companies need to do with their AI strategy is to really present an invigorating future of work for employees and customers that sounds appealing. And I think we're entering such a diabolical, mechanistic way of thinking about work and service, and it's so freaking unappealing. It's ridiculous, like for me to think about how hard it's going to be in the future to find a human when I need a support issue resolved. That doesn't that's really unappealing to me. And for me to think about and people using careless phrases like digital teammates to really intimidate me with this 24/7 bot that never rests and never sleeps. And I'm trying to feed my family, and I got to go home and regroup, and this bot is my teammate outworking me all the time. That's such a crappy way of talking about this technology. And I think there's a better way, and it's a more human-centric way that incorporates this innovation. So I really do think that individual companies need to really articulate this before they go into these projects, because otherwise I don't see how you're going to get the kind of user adoption that Graham is advocating for, or the user experience that he's describing. Anyway, I'll stop.
I think that you made an extremely good point. And I think if you look at why companies implement technology, it's often to reduce costs, or the theory of reducing costs. So if I have this new technology, I can do the same work with less people in theory, faster and better. But often, as we've seen, that doesn't really work out in the way that we understand why it is not, because of a variety of factors. So you see a lot of hype around AI replacing large amounts of work. There's been work done by Frey at the University of Oxford talking about which jobs are going to be replaced and what have you. But if you look at RPA as a precursor to agent-based AI, there's a lot of fanfare about RPA, robotic process automation, replacing whole processes with technology. But we don't find that's the case typically. We find they automate certain tasks that are standardized and simplified and centralized and are candidates for automation. Think back to 1990 at the start of the business process engineering revolution, when Michael Hammer wrote his famous HBR article, "Re-engineering work, don't automate, obliterate." In other words, get rid of all those crappy processes, centralize them, simplify them, standardize them, then you can do BPR, or now you can do RPA, and now you can do agent-based AI instead. Most companies don't have these processes at all nailed to the floor, and unless it's perhaps accounting or certain financial activities or something in production, manufacturing, and what have you. They have. I worked with a UK retail bank implementing market resource management 10 years ago. They had dozens of different processes all doing the same thing, all similar, but all different. So companies come up and say, we can add this technology, and Klarna is a great example for agent-based customer service, claiming to replace 700 staff and save many millions of dollars through using AI. Okay, it's a poster thing. Whether it's all true or not, I don't really know. But if you think about it, if I have a set of processes I want to be able to use agent-based AI to improve or replace or to reduce costs, I need to make sure we've taken out all the waste out of those first. That's quite a lot of work. That's going to be you need to go apply lean thinking to your process to get rid of all the things you shouldn't be doing in the first place. Then I'm going to need to standardize those things to gain economies of scale. So all using the same good enough processes that are candidates for the third thing, which drives your operating leverage, which is be able to automating things that have high costs and are used very many times. So these are the candidates for agent-based AI, but only when you've made them simpler, taken all the waste, made them the same, got rid of all the things you shouldn't be doing in the first place, and created a good enough set, and they are compatible with automation through Gen AI, through agentic AI anyway, which not all processes are. So the hype, as usual, precedes the reality. And if you're not very careful, you get caught on Hume's guillotine, where the world that ought to be gets caught up and gets sliced to pieces by the world that is out there. This is why we see so many projects with Gen AI more generally and agent-based AI more recently fail big time, because they don't understand, they haven't done all their homework, they haven't done all the preparation, they haven't managed to change the people required. I think it's a really important point. You've got to feel you've got to have a job that's worth doing tomorrow. If you look at the history of it, if you look at the history of digital technology, although there's been many fears of jobs being lost, generally the jobs have just changed. And often the jobs have actually increased as a consequence of technology being brought in. So you have new jobs doing new things together with technology. Or as the old ones become more efficient and effective, you get new jobs coming along as well. So maybe we're going to find that with agent or Gen AI and agent-based AI anyway. Only time will tell. We're still experimenting at the moment. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And, look, I mean, no one has the crystal ball and exactly how much, but I think right now you're talking about mostly saving on tasks rather than full jobs. Now, in very large companies, if the tasks accumulate enough, then that creates certain kinds of labor efficiencies. But all I'm saying is if you go in with that approach, I think you need to go in with a different approach. I don't like that approach. That might be part of it, but you really need to think about what kind of enhanced value you're going to provide to customers. And look, I mean, if employees like keep their jobs, that's great. But if they're stressed out because they're like working their tails off to try to keep up with this perceived threat, that's a really horrible work environment. Yes. I do want to push back on one thing though, which is on this real-time project monitoring thing that I pressed on you a couple of times. I don't think that's all hype, and the concept of reason why I like it is because the technology is getting better for that, as Ralph articulated in his example. And what it does is it forces conversations between the partner, customer, and vendor. And the customer, ironically enough, should really own those conversations and not defer to the outside experts. And that's where customers can get into trouble. But I do think, and I'm using real time as a little bit of an exaggeration, because I'm not saying that we need to have like a project health watch on our wrist necessarily, though maybe someday we will. It's more that when projects go off the rails and you study these failures, you always ask yourself, how the hell did you get so far down this crappy road without rethinking the premise? And so I'm going to push on that a little bit, because I think that actually is important, and the work being done there, while it may not be as sexy as agents, I think it's very important work.
I think so. If you don't know how well a project is doing, we can't really make any changes as necessary. The only thing I worry about real-time or heavily data-oriented stuff is, first of all, it becomes takes on a life of its own.
Right.
Secondly, people start to look at the numbers. This is why I don't like OKRs and I like KPIs.
Yeah.
Focus on the numbers. They start to game the numbers, because that's what we will do if we've got targets being set.
Sure, it can be hard to quantify that. I agree with you, but I would also point out to you that there's a vast improvement in employee sentiment tools as well, that aren't just about numbers, but measure sentiment on an ongoing basis. And while sentiment is not always an indicator of how well a product is going, it's an important component that can be integrated into these tools.
Remember back in the 80s, we had this wonderful thing, an invention from Japan called MBWA. Remember that? Management by walking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I've run some big programs and projects with, in one case with over 100 people. And I spent all my time walking about, finding out what was going on, getting a feel for the project. I had a big chart on the wall that had outcomes and deliverable milestones. I wasn't so bothered about most products are built around tasks. They shouldn't be. They should be built around milestones and outcomes.
Yeah.
We manage the outcomes. We use outcome-based project management, not task-based project management. That's what amateurs do. So I spent a lot of time walking about and making exactly what was going on, where there were going to be problems. And we used daily stand-ups for small parts of the program and weekly equivalents. This is before Agile became popular, so that we knew what we delivered, what we're going to deliver next week, and what was going to get in our way. We need to sort out. And then next month and next quarter for large programs as work as well. So I agree. Technology is a fantastic thing to have to provide you with up-to-date information. But it's also it's a input into the process of understanding how well your project is going by getting out there and talking to people and knowing what the hell's going on.
Right, and there's no substitute for the on-site experience, but I'm arguing with you that I think you can simulate some of that with technology. Okay. It's not the same, but I think it can be simulated. And the reality is that the on-site thing you're describing, it doesn't always work anymore for a lot of different reasons. But I see that Ralph needs to step in and control his own show. So, Ralph, I'm sorry to get the debate.
Easy does it. Easy does it.
Back to you, Ralph. Over to you.
It is to the liking of our dear friend Marshall that we have some enthusiasm which is driving us forward, and that we have as one of his parts in our revised show approach is that he's doing the outro. And looking to the clock, surprise, we are over the hour already. So I would love to get you two for some final statement in the area of where I would like to pose the question in the attitude Marshall was doing the outro wrap up. Such as we have heard that AI does not seem to be the savior for a good implementation CRM project. And I would, out of curiosity, ask for your gut feeling in that moment, because we are in absence of the crystal balls, do not look into the future as precisely as some vendors simulate or try to convince us that they can do so. So I would like to ask you, starting with Graham, where you think in 5 years' time we could be with the support of some AI helping guidance to follow up on the stream of activities, and then follow up to John after you're finished with a statement how his perspective he started to explain with AI can support, technology can support and can help, that it's not in a real-time attitude, but that we have regular control over the project, if it's on track or not.
Okay, so 5 years' time. So that's
Yeah.
a lifetime in the world of AI, as we've seen
At least.
regular announcements from ChatGPT or from OpenAI companies anyway. Where are we going to be? So I think in 5 years' time we'll have three things. We'll have a really good understanding of use cases where AI is really powerful and really works. We'll have a good understanding of what complementary capabilities we need to be able to build in order to get all the value out of AI. And we'll have the intelligence and the good manners as management to bring our staff along with us, because they'll have as much to say and as many good ideas about how AI will pan out in the future than management does. Eric Bernofsson always says we overestimate the value of AI in the short, or technology in the short term, and underestimate its value in the longer term. I'm going to leave you with one quote from Winston Churchill, when he famously said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." That's what we need to be doing with AI.
Yes, I agree. We need to try to take control of the narrative a little bit more, as per that quote. I think Graham's right on with that. I will add that I think someday I geek out on AI a lot, like the science of it. I think someday we'll have truly cognitive systems, and that's going to change a lot of things, but I can't put a timetable on that. I think it's way more than 5 years. But that's a whole different world, and we're not there yet. So I'm kind of talking about the logical evolution of the current tech, and I think Graham's nailed it down. So let me say something a little bit different then to end it, which is what I'd like to see in 5 years, which is I'd like to see customers and companies interacting in a truly intelligent and transparent way with technology as an enabler. So in other words, like I should be able to opt in and share exactly the kind of data I want to share with companies to get exactly the result that I want. And it should be as high touch or low touch as I need as a customer and as the company needs to make a profit. And right now that's all screwed up. Companies are taking way too much data. They don't know who's profitable or not. They don't know how to serve people across channels. I'd like to think in 5 years we could make some progress on that.
Cool. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Graham, being our guest today, for your time and insight. And thank you, John, for jumping in and having what we could say is, from our perspective, not only a good laugh, but also a friendly bark from the dog, and also some signals to Marshall at a better place when he is looking down to us and having a smile and a laugh with us together.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, John, that you jumped in. And the audience, please make a note and tune in next week when we dive into commerce strategies, business to business versus business to consumer versus business to customer strategies, which our guest Sam Gupta. Till then, please enjoy, reflect on your projects, be fair enough to yourself, and do not make a big fuss if you find out that you goofed to a certain extent. Just put the restart and go freshly forward with enthusiasm and with the positive spirit we have had all in these conversations together with Marshall and with our guests from today. Thank you very much for being a part of our audience. Seeing you soon. Bye.
Thank you.